In summary then, when we talk about leveling, the simplest strategy is to reduce throughput times and use the difference between the throughput times and your customer lead time to allow samples to wait in a leveling queue, and then you launch them, and you know that when you launch them they'll get through the lab quickly and they won't take a long and variable length of time. So you move samples quickly through a defined sequence of testing with little or no queuing in, first out order. Make it simple to manage, and this is very, very important. It has to be simple to manage and understand using a rhythm wheel or a test train. And because we're controlling the workload and mix via leveling, throughput times, i.e. the time from starting to review completion, they're consistent and they're minimized. Essentially, and I know this is very quick, but what a rhythm wheel is where you can use a rhythm wheel where your volatility needs to be not very great, and you would have typically maybe a higher volume, to be for a higher volume situation, where you know that you can set up a fixed repeating pattern. This will be an example of a 5-day week fixed repeating pattern. And you've got, what the advantages of it are is you've converted your previous volatility or making a new plan every day into a fixed pattern that we know and we've proven. If you do things in this way, we'll still get through all the testing we need to get through. We'll still meet the service level that we need to meet, and we'll have a result on a certain day every week, and it's very predictable and very we know what's going to happen from one day to the next. So, in this example, you might have one test on day one, the write-up of that test on the second day, and maybe another test, and so on. So this day one there could be every Monday we do this, every Tuesday we do this, and so on. And that's what essentially a rhythm wheel is in a very quick slide. A train, on the other hand, is where your volatility is such, or your volume is such, that you can't have a fixed repeating cycle every week. By the way, I should have said a rhythm wheel could be a repeating cycle every 2 days even, or it could be every 2 weeks. It depends on what the situation is. Whereas a train is about grouping together productive quantities of samples, but we know they cannot follow a fixed pattern. And the reason they can't is that we have one sample type comes off 1 week, but we might not see another one of it for 10 days time, but then we might get another one in 3 days time. So we can't have a repeating pattern every week. The key thing about a train is you group together samples that would have similar tests. So basically, on this train here, these are samples that they have appearance, pH and dissolution. They can all go on one train. A key point of trains is the way they work in conjunction with an incoming queue is when your sample arrives into the lab, you've established what your service level agreement is, i.e. your customer lead time. So from the date of receipt of the sample, maybe I will say that I must have my result back in 10 days, just to pick a number. You know, though, when you design this train or this group of samples, that this train may take 2 days to go through all of that testing and get all the approval done. So the throughput time or the test review time for that group of samples might be as little as 2 days when you group it together. So if I subtract 2 from 10, I get 8. That gives me 8 days in which I can queue that sample in theory. So the must start date, every sample that arrives into the lab, I'll assign it a must start date. This sample must start on this date. And I create a rule that says I won't start that sample until either its must start date or unless I have a full productive train of work to run through the lab. The point here is that you're creating full productive days of work as much as you possibly can. And when you design your train, and again when you simulate it, through the simulation you will be able to identify, well, in a month of 21 or 22 days, that 18 or 19 of them at least have run full productive trains. There will always be situations maybe where a sample has reached its must start date and it must go, and there aren't enough other similar samples to run on a train to make a full productive train. But we're willing to take the hit on that because over the longer term, it's a much more productive way of work.